views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Numerous polls conducted this year show a majority of African Americans have a negative view of race relations. African Americans as well as Americans. Whether it's silent protests like that of NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick or the destructive scenes we've seen in some of our major cities across the U.S., it feels as though there's no real immediate solution in sight. The question, how do we first bring healing to these communities affected, and then how do we take the steps beyond just talking about it to solve racial tensions in our country? Our guests today try to tackle it and weigh that situation out. And stay with us. You're watching Perspectives. We'll be right back right after this.
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective which shines a light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective? Let 'em know.
The image of Rodney King being beaten by police in 1991 is still etched in many of our minds. Since the subsequent outcome of that case, even after understanding and, or I should say, outstanding video evidence, it's fair to say the trust has deteriorated even more today between African Americans, black communities, and the police department. Numerous efforts and initiatives have come about since the Rodney King incident, and probably just as much deadly incidents have occurred between unarmed black people and police. So the question now begs, how do we better police communities, and I should say better police African American communities, and how do we keep police safe as well as not have altercations between cops and members of these communities that turn deadly so fast? How do we address, based on statistics, the disproportionate arrests and the deadly altercations of people of color? Joining us now to help me unpack all the issues, we have political strategist Roy Paul and Perspectives political analyst Joyce Johnson, and welcome, and good to have you guys.
Always.
And as always, it's good to have you, and we're always, talking about these issues, and really, it seems as though a lot of talk, but then yet and still, what is the call to action? How do we transcend it? And I'm starting with Roy first, because we talk about Baltimore, we talk about Charlotte, North Carolina. What needs to happen in order to turn the curve here?
Well, I think the way to best frame the question is how do you police the police, right?
Right.
Because in each one of these instances, we find there's one common denominator, and that is the police in many cases are acting with excessive force. And in New York, we had a bad policy of stop and frisk, and I just ran into Sadiq Y, who was really the architect around the policing of the body cameras of the police officers. Mm-hmm. And when police officers know that they're being watched, that's when they start acting differently. If they see someone in the crowd with the camera, they freak out. There's a reason for that, because they don't want what they're doing on tape. And so the best thing that we can do is to shine the light on what's going on with the police officers. And of course, they're not all bad, but those who act with excessive force need to be on patrol.
In addition to that, because, we're all on camera now, but how about in Charlotte? There, a number of the police had the cameras on themselves, and yet the police chief only submitted one. So there's a couple out there that from different angles of whether this guy actually had a gun and all of that. But here's what the real problem is. It will never change. Let's just agree and know that in every profession there are the folks who do good things, do it right, and there are those who don't. And at the local level, we pay so much attention to the presidential race, the mayor's race, and all of that, and we don't pay enough attention because all things are local. So when there's a police chief hired or up for re-election, or a local district attorney, in other words, the criminal justice system, I think, is stacked against us. And we have not participated in the choice of who do we want or not. And so in late 90s, the Justice Department did a survey, not survey, but a study, and talking about the infiltration of KKK white supremacists in police departments all across the country. That's over 20 years ago. And we've all slept that. And you know, not to say that it is 50% or 30%, but we don't know. But if it was happening then, multiply times 20 years. And so you have people who are in law enforcement, opposed to, in opposition to what is fundamentally their jobs, and they are in these these communities with reckless abandon and shooting to kill, and without any consequences.
Poll numbers are showing that disproportionate arrest rates between African Americans, blacks, Hispanics continue to rise. And then when you look at what's going on, take a look at these. Police are using, or police are most likely to use, deadly force against, and then it talks about a black person, a white person, and you see 75% of blacks, 36% whites, and then when you see the numbers, how things just really doesn't matter, 49% total, 56 white, 18% black. And when you look at race relations in the United States, how it's viewed, whether good or bad, and we see the numbers right now, and the numbers, of course, according to a CBS News, New York Times poll, show that race relations in the U.S. definitely at an all-time low.
It reminds me of the South, way back when, you know, and now it's more national. In the southern states where we were all afraid to go and drive and this, that, and another, a white person was, the likelihood of a white person who killed and murdered a black person being prosecuted and brought to justice was absolutely zero, absolutely zero. That's the same thing we're having now nationwide with respect to police.
Share with me a little bit about this, Roy, because we see a lot of protesters. A lot of media focuses on the provocators, but yet and still there's also this quest, in addition to protest, of really having to address policy and change policy, because you could protest on one side, but speak to us a little bit about that policy issue on the other.
Well, policy is how you change it, fundamentally, in terms of the law, right? You put some meat and some teeth behind the policies, and that's how you really get some solutions. But the fundamental problem here is that there is the suspicion of guilt, even when you're doing nothing wrong, simply because of your skin color. I always tell the story, and it's unfortunate, but just a couple of weeks ago, I was visiting my mother, and my brother has a nice car, and I didn't have any gas in my car. And so naturally, you know, whenever you don't have gas, you take someone else's car who's got gas. And I was driving down one of the main streets in town, and I got pulled over. And the police officer came out, one on one side, one on the other, two white police officers. They both had flashlights, and, you know, they're looking in the car, you know. And the police officer says, can I get your license and registration? I gave it to him, and he went back to his car, blah, 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 came back, and he said, okay, thank you, you can go. I look up and I go, why'd you stop me? He said, nope, no worries, you can go ahead now. Even if there was a reason to stop me, which there wasn't, because he didn't give me one, the message that you send when you stop someone, give them no reason and tell them they can just go ahead, is that it had to have been my color or the car that I was driving.
Well, you're not supposed to be in that car.
I'm not supposed to be in the car.
One of my neighbors, it happened to him, an elderly gentleman, really nice, you know, car. This is on the west side, on the east side, in the 90s. Stopped for no reason. Same thing. And the first thing was asked, is this your car? So the presumption is that we are wrong regardless to whatever. But when you talk about policies, it's got to be, you know, who enacts policies? Who makes changes? Who makes laws? People. And those people are whom? Elected officials. So it all goes back to fundamentally the vote, who you have in office or not. And we have not engaged at the local level. Everybody runs to do the presidential, and please, vote November 8th. But, you know, local elections are just as important, and we sit out those elections. And that's where folks at the local level, you know, the state legislature, the county, the town, and all of that. That's where laws are enacted. That's where policies are put in place, or that's where there are no repercussions. At the local level, you could have gone to the, you know, the chief of police, and if that person was right, to complain about that officer who, without provocation, without anything, just stopped you. Oh, and just go on. Not until they understand that there are consequences to that. And I say to folks, and everybody says, what is the The only power we have is the power of the vote, because that affects legislation, that affects who you know, enforces or not.
And community mobilization is so important. Black Lives Matter.
Exactly.
You start talking about politicians. I've met some of the most laziest politicians you will ever meet in your life. They're not enacting anything unless they've got a little fire to tell them to do it.
Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing, having these organizations that really can cause, really can cause some sort of movement. Coming up, we want to talk about the 2016 presidential election and race relations. That's going to be the topic of conversation when we return right here on Perspectives.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry.
Go long, son!
it's always worth it.
Whoa, faster!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat?
1 in 5 children struggles with hunger in America. Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Kids will spend 15 minutes watching online videos like this one.
Brushing for 2 minutes now can save your child from severe tooth pain later. 2 minutes, twice a day. They have the time.
You think getting dumped by text is harsh? Try getting dumped by a tennis ball. My ex-owner drove me out to the woods, yelled fetch, and by the time I brought the ball back, he was gone. Yeah, I was pissed. But the folks at the shelter helped me let go of my anger. I learned coping skills, like taking it to the hole. Boom! Now I'm ready to fetch again. But how about I throw and you run and get it?
Back here on Perspectives, Darren Jaime here with you. We are talking about race relations in America, the current state of crisis. If you look, whether it's Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Charlotte, North Carolina, or you look even out to Los Angeles, California, questions still continue to emerge about race relations. How are we allowing things to get this way, and what can we do to turn things around? But when we talk about the 2016 presidential election, of course, at front and center, Donald Trump. A lot of hateful, divisive rhetoric, and people have had their comments to say about Donald Trump as well as Hillary Clinton. As the debates continue to go back and forth, race relations are a big part of this presidential election. And when we talk about Donald Trump, obviously you talk about Mexicans, you talk about Jews, he's insulted women, he's insulted this, but particularly we're along racial lines. How big are we going? Is this going to be probably the biggest presidential election that we're seeing with regards to racial relations?
In my lifetimes, absolutely. And when we talk about, you know, be clear, 2008, everyone thought it's over, it's done. America has turned that corner, you know, regarding race.
I didn't think
first
that.
African American, neither did I know better. The first African American president, you know, it's going to be smooth sailing policies affecting all the people for the good of the people are going to be in place. And we, you know, slept a 2010 election when everything turned Republican and whatever. And race relations have gone down, they have exploded. I think, and this is a twisted sense, the white America, the vestiges of becoming a minority one day soon, is something so internally offensive to them that there's been a significant backlash. It certainly was to President Obama, when even his colleagues in the Congress, they made it a point of, plan to dismantle his presidency even before, the ink was dry to saying, I'm president of the United States. And so that's been 8 years of this, and that he has enacted some policies, but the notion of, I think the backlash in having a black president was trickled down to local community and stop and frisk, mass incarceration, now murdering of black folks. It is that if the Klansmen, if the white supremacists are in our police forces, how do you act out that? Roy, was stopped by 2 white cops for no reason, no probable cause or whatnot. So race relations is a function, has been the deterioration has been a result, I think, of a black president with nobody thought on the other side would happen. My mother and most blacks that I thought I'd never live to see the day. I don't think my contemporaries, baby boomers, who 40, 50 years ago were spitting on blacks, hitting them in lunch counters, lynching, beating, and all of that. And I think, fast forward, they're acting out again like that.
Let me ask Roy the question here. When we talk about this upcoming presidential election, obviously with race relations being the way that they are, 2008 you saw a large amount of communities of color really voting for President Obama. Are we going to see the same amount? Do we anticipate the same kind of voter turnout given the fact that, the 2 candidates that are out there, or are we going to see less? Because given the fact that you've got all this racial rhetoric and divide that's going on, some people are saying, I have to raise my voice, but then other people are saying, you know what, well, Obama's not really running, so I might take a seat. Right?
No, I think it's going to be compounded because you just don't have race, you also have gender. And Hillary Clinton is going to really ignite the fire around the female base, and that really is a very powerful base. It's much more than men. And with Donald Trump, the rhetoric that he's been spewing has really, really motivated people coming out of the woodwork to vote for him and to vote against him. And I think that's going to show up in this election. I was just watching a CNN report where Hillary Clinton was touting the support of LeBron James in Ohio. And only in this kind of an election would Hillary Clinton be rushing to get support based on the endorsement of LeBron James. That tells you we're going really in the wrong direction, I think, when it comes to endorsements in presidential races. But it just goes to show you how hard she's trying to push in a place like Ohio to mobilize the African American vote by throwing out LeBron James. But that is unfortunately what we have come to see in our campaigns. And when Joy says, this is the most important race when it comes to race relations in my lifetime, we're going to keep saying that. I hear that all the time. Every presidential election, this is the most important, this is the most important, this is the most important. We have to really understand what that means. And that means that at some point, there's going to be a race or a pocket of people that's going to be taken advantage of because of their unifying force, right? And we have to be very, very careful about that. What policies are any of these people enacting that's going to help African Americans?
Well, the reason this is the most important, because, presidents will come and go, congressmen will come and go, senators will come and go. There are potentially 3 Supreme Court seats that may be vacant. And the president and the Congress, our Senate, have the opportunities to select 3. They will have lifetime appointments. If conservative judges who want to make America great again, which for me is a cold word to take it back to a different time and era, 50-some years ago with respect to minorities and women too. So it is fundamentally, for me, it is the Supreme Court, and I worry that no one is thinking about that. 2 candidates, and I would like to believe that our women are fired up around Hillary. They are and they are not. What this has become is a popularity contest. 2 presumably flawed candidates in some folks' mind. We don't like, so it's it's a popularity contest, rather a contest on principles and issues and impact. The Supreme Court appointment, every last one of us here will be dead and gone by the time the next Supreme Court is out of here. And they are the last line.
The diversity on the Supreme Court is important, and it's not just we want liberal justices. We need an African American justice. We need to really diversify the people who are enacting those laws.
Indeed, but at the fundamental, I agree with you, and I believe that the best opportunity for that would be a Clinton administration.
Of course.
A Clinton administration, coupled with someone who's ideologically aligned with how we see a Democratic Party, inclusion, opportunity, the influence of money in politics. So those appointments are going to be critical. Conservative, the other side of the coin, 3 conservative judges, our folk on there, if you want to call it that, might as well twiddle their thumb because they will have carte blanche. That is the law. They are the last vestiges of hope for any kind of recourse for American public. What they decide is it. We can elect and unelect people,
So this election, from your
for
perspective,
me, is about the Supreme Court.
And for you?
Well, the Supreme Court is very important, but it's also about mobilization and engagement, right? Especially around people who are not tapped into the system, and that's important.
Oh, no, because it's a numbers game. So so I agree with him. We're not at odds. But in terms of who, and I've had screeching conversations with some friends who are saying my vote doesn't matter, and that's where I'm going with this. They're all the same.
Well, I'm going to take a quick break, come back and talk about those who aren't voting, because I think you have some statistics about people who aren't voting. So stay with us, come back with more in just a few seconds.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
When you're out there, there's no telling what you'll find.
I see it, I see it! Oh, look at you.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Being prepared is a part of who you are, but it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
Coming back out of the break, I'll talk a little bit about what I was talking about in the break real quick, and I was that people don't sometimes understand the importance of going out and voting, because politicians do take a look and see where these voting blocks are.
And that's who they respond to. That's who they appeal to. When there's legislation, the legislation is going to be in support of constituents who vote, pure and simple.
If people who didn't traditionally vote came out and voted, they can flip the entire system. And it doesn't take a lot of them. It takes a third of them, because sometimes the turnout are about 10%. You get another 5% of people to come outside of that system who only vote in general elections, they can completely change the landscape.
And Joyce, you got some numbers real quick before we get out of it, so share with us.
I was on a show the other, not on a show, but I was listening online to Jesse Jackson giving a sermon. But anyway, his point was he wanted to share with the constituents, the folks, the number of black folks in various states who are not even registered to vote, not counting those who are registered and don't vote. So just let me share this with you. In North Carolina, so the power of the one person, one vote. North Carolina, unregistered, 475,000. Pennsylvania, 300,000. South Carolina, 300,000. Texas, 615,000. Wow. Illinois, 395,000. Maryland, 353,000. Michigan, 289,000. Ohio, 299. California, 500,000. Alabama, 275,000. New York, 560,000 people. Just to give you a sense of the numbers of the magnitude, that's not counting people who, forget folks who are registered. Mm-hmm. These are unregistered African Americans in these states. You tell me the impact that we could have. Donald Trump could say whatever he wanted to say. You know, black women were most responsible for President Obama's 2012 win. Mm-hmm. And imagine if all of us were fully engaged.
The question is, how do you engage them?
We got 1 minute. You got the last word. Go ahead.
I wish I knew. I would have been elected if I knew.
Right.
But it's important to reach them, you know, and traditional ways don't do it. Robocalls don't do it. You send mailers, it doesn't do it. So I don't really know what the answer is, but I wish I knew. Do you know what the answer is?
The answer is in the off-years elections. Right now, there is massive, and to their credit, I believe Georgia's going to turn blue. To their credit, they're doing massive voter registration. But it's, you know, that's the first piece.
There's a difference between registration and actually getting that soul to the poll.
And so
you know?
Whoever wins this election will all be turnout. And I think that our party and the allied folks around us, labor unions who have that go door to door, pull you out, the mechanics for it, that happened in 2008 and 2012 for Obama. It can happen again if it's done well.
Roy Paul, Joyce Johnson, thank you so much. We are out of time, and thank you so much for coming and sharing with us.
Out of breath, too.
Listen, yes. But we're glad to have Roy back. He's been gone for a while, been on the campaign trail. Things didn't work out quite so well, but it doesn't mean that you won't see him again. We're trying to hope that he does it again. But thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Got it.
And good to have you. Listen, we're about out of show here. We want to thank you, the viewer, for tuning in and checking us out here on Perspectives. As always, we encourage you to stay connected to us here at Perspectives, and we'll continue to bring you information as we proceed and get closer to Election Day. It seems like it's just around the corner. Yes, it is just around the corner. And we're going to take a look and be able to come back after Election Day and actually be able to talk about the voter turnout and also analyze and break down some of the real tracks and trends that we have here in New York. For all of us here on the Set of Perspectives, I'm Darren Jaime. Thanks for watching. People say if they like the shirt and they like the tie and they like the socks, well, I want to say Ties by Marcus. You did a good job. This is for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Continue to do what you do, Marcus. And we'll see you later on. Take care.
Let them know.
What's on your mind?
Let them know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fable.